Hi, I'm Dave Epstein. Welcome to this edition of Growing Wisdom, sponsored by Lowe's. Today we're talking fall planted bulbs. Fall is a great time to plant bulbs, and Lowe's said go select whatever bulbs you want, and we get to go plant these in the garden. When I'm selecting bulbs, I'm looking for several different things. I'm looking for different colors, different heights, different bloom times, as well as whether the bulbs are hardy in this particular zone. So you get the bulbs home and now you have to plant them, obviously, and I love putting bulbs in the yard. We're really talking spring bulbs right now, and there's all sorts of different varieties. Obviously, I'm not covering all the varieties of bulbs, but I want to give you a few tips on how to plant them. So the first thing is the bigger bulbs will be planted deeper, generally anywhere from 6 to as much as 8 inches. Check the back of the bag to see just how deep you want to plant your bulbs. The smaller ones like the crocuses and the anemones don't need to be planted very deep at all, just a couple to 3 inches. Bulbs should be planted in the fall after it's cooled off a little bit, so you want to wait till mid to late fall. And I always have a saying, if you can get into the ground, you can plant your bulbs. So even if you forget and you wait till November or even early December, if you can get in the ground to plant them, it will be okay. Generally, I walk around the yard to find spots where I think the bulbs will look good as they come up from early spring all the way through summer, depending on the type of bulb. The front of the border is a great spot for those smaller bulbs, things like anemones and crocuses, and even some of the smaller daffodils and smaller irises. The middle part of the garden or the back of the garden is a good spot for the taller bulbs, things like your alliums, especially those big alliums that really do get quite tall, 4, even 5 feet. Another thing to consider when you're planting your bulbs is that you never want to cut the bulb leaves after they're done flowering. That's because the leaves are charging the bulbs for next year. So I try to think about where's a plant going to come up that might hide the leaves if they're not looking so good. So for example, I might plant some of the daffodils behind an upcoming hosta. So the daffodils will come up, they'll flower, then the hosta will come up and kind of hide the leaves a little bit. I'm not a big fan of the bulb planting tool in order to plant bulbs. I think you can do it much easier just using a trowel or a shovel. And if you need something to measure how deep you're going, this probably isn't the best way to do it. When I'm planting bulbs, rather than put them in one at a time, I like to clear an area, put the bulbs in almost like a cookie sheet, and then just cover them immediately with soil. It's a much faster way to plant your bulbs. So for example, we're clearing this area for the anemones, we're planting them 3 inches deep, adding some fertilizer, and covering them back up. If you're wondering what type of fertilizer I'm adding, there's lots of fertilizers made specifically for bulbs and flowers. Those are best, but you can also use an all-purpose fertilizer. You can plant tulips in the ground, however, a lot of the highly hybridized versions just don't come back as well after the 2nd and 3rd year. So I recommend putting tulips in containers. It's just an easier way to manage them. Finally, some bulbs are not hardy like ranunculus, so you don't want to be planting those in the ground if you live in one of the colder zones. You could try planting them in a container, keeping it in the garage as long as the temperature there stayed above 10 degrees all winter long. Planting bulbs in the fall means a big reward in the spring with lots of color. For Growing Wisdom, sponsored by Lowe's, I'm Dave Epstein.